Hey, we're going to do some rich people math today. I'm Dustin Tibbetts with Jazz Wealth, and he is
Eric.
Also with Jazz Wealth. Hey, okay, so really popular amongst the very wealthy people, they do something called a line of credit, or it's called a securities-based line of credit. SBLOC, if you want to sound really cool.
Ooh.
That doesn't look good at all. And so we're going to talk about it today because there's a lot of people, when we bring it up, they go, yeah, but I'm not going to borrow from my brokerage account because it's going to cost me 6%, so whatever it is, and well, I don't want that debt. All right, well, let's look at it both ways. And I'm not advocating for it. If you don't do it or don't want to do it, it's not something we make money on or force clients to do. But I want to give you an exact example of how the math works out a little differently than what you think. And but first, Eric, line of credit against a brokerage account. Good for people, bad for people, indifferent.
I thought you were going to say, but first, a word from our sponsors or something.
You're looking at it right here.
So line of credit, good or bad? I think that it really does depend, though people have to be careful and make sure that they have the ability to not get themselves into trouble. Yeah. If they've taken a line of credit, if the stock price goes down, then potentially you could get, would be what a margin call, basically.
A margin call.
So and a margin call. So then that means that, hey, you either got to put more money in or you're going to surrender some of your stock. So just making sure there, though, again, so it's not for everybody. It's definitely an option.
It's just, I wanted to talk about like a different way of thinking with no incentive, right? So I'm not going to pitch anything. We're not going to sell anything. So let's go through the example here that I put together. We're going to pretend that this person, and you could change the numbers. I just wanted to use whole numbers so it looked normal for you.
Yeah.
So we're going to say in scenario number one, the person has $1 million portfolio. And for whatever reason, they need to withdraw $200,000. Buying property, I don't know, something. So if they sell off $200,000, let's assume that's a capital gain, then they would pay, in their case, they're going to have a 20% flat tax. Let's just say it's long-term capital gain. Flat tax of $40,000. I know I'm making the assumption that this was a capital gain, but watch where we go.
And also 20%, some people are going to watch and they're going to say, well, it's only 15%. So it depends on your income. The higher the income, the cap there, the highest bracket actually is 20%.
Yep, and you'll see when I go through both scenarios, I'm trying to go worst case in both. So I don't want one to look really tough and the other one to look great, and then you feel like I'm pitching you. So I'll show you how I did that.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, effectively, they end up with $160,000. That doesn't really matter in this case. What matters is their portfolio now has a balance of $800,000. If we just assume they gained 6%, they made $48,000 over the course of 12 months, and they have no interest on a line of credit because they chose to sell off their position. So their net gain is $48,000 from the growth, 6% of $800,000. And so at the end of 12 months, their portfolio value is $848,000. Now they're happy. They got their $200,000 out. They paid their tax and did whatever. What the rich people look and do, and again, it doesn't have to be that you're filthy rich. This is just an example. They say, well, I've got $1 million in my portfolio. I'm willing to borrow the $200,000 instead of withdrawing it. That means I get to avoid selling off any stock. I get to avoid the long-term capital gain, and I have essentially, it should say proceeds of $200,000 there in the form of a line of credit. So now they have $1 million left in the portfolio. Let's say they get the same return of 6%. You can see that that's now going to be $60,000. The interest on the line of credit, to make it tougher now, I said this is going to be an 8% interest rate. So whereas in scenario number one, I said, well, let's give them the long-term capital gains tax of 20. You can see I'm making it still tough. I'm pretending you pay 8% for a line of credit, which now people are going to say
currently could be, give or take.
It might be.
That.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on with the Fed fund rate right now and everything.
This is where I'm going to say rich dad, poor dad mindset here, but this is where the poor side of it, people go, you're just signing me up for 8% debt. Like, why wouldn't I, if I have $200,000, I'm going to buy a little condo or something, why wouldn't I just go get a mortgage at 7% or whatever it is? Well, here's the reason why. So now they're going to voluntarily pay the $16,000 in a 12-month period. With the growth of their portfolio, they have a net gain of $44,000, but look at the portfolio value. So in scenario number one, they're at $848. Scenario number two, $1,044,000 that can compound and do whatever it's going to do, even though they took on the debt of the line of credit. And a big part of that is the tax, that, the big part of the difference is the tax there.
Yeah.
So do you think that that is tax avoidance?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tax strategy that could allow you to potentially grow your wealth even more and eventually come back and say, hey, you know what? Now I'm going to close out that line of credit. I'm going to, sell off and do that. And in this scenario, especially in this scenario, long-term capital gains at 20%, potentially they're in a higher income earning year in the next 3 years. They're going to be in a lower income earning year, where at least if they can get to a 15% bracket, that in itself is going to save you, on $200,000, $10,000 right there, just in that 5%.
Yeah, and to me, we know in scenario number one, they must have higher income this year. Okay, cool. Well, in scenario number two, let's say they go, I'll have the line of credit for 2 or 3 years because my wife is going to have our second child or whatever, and she's not going to work. Well, then in that year, maybe we go do some tax loss harvesting along the way to offset any capital gains. We get into year number 3, wife has a baby, maybe they both decide to stay home. And now we can sell at a capital gains rate that may be lower at that point, take that profit and use it to pay off some of the line of credit. So it's not just a matter of me sharing a slide and going, look at how magical this is. It's more like, okay, that starts the conversation of which direction do you want to go? And then from there, well, how do we make sure that this costs you less over time? So that's $16,000 in interest. How can we offset that with other things, along the way?
Yeah, and somebody who's really risk averse, maybe this scenario doesn't work for on the line of credit just for the sake of, they say, oh no, well, I could have just pulled the money out, gotten rid of it, the debt. Somebody who has a little bit more risk tolerance potentially, and also just to make sure everybody understands, this is for something like a brokerage account, joint account, individual account. This is not for IRAs. You can't borrow against your IRA or your Roth IRA and have a line of credit against that. That's not allowed because it's considered a retirement account.
Well, technically, there's a trick there, right? If you want to do
well, there are strategies, but it's not something that you can borrow and not put back within 60 days.
Yeah. Well, hey, can we figure out how to make it 120? That's separate video.
We have some crazy stuff we've talked through. Yeah, tax strategy wise.
That's actually, we should do that one next because that
was a cool.
That's
idea,
outside of the box
concept.
thinking there. Anyways, so all I wanted to do was put that in front of you, and I used 6% as the return because someone's going to say, yes, but what if we lost 6%? Well, the choice of how your account is invested is always up to you in a brokerage account, right? Mm-hmm. So right now you could say, I'll take a money market fund for 5.25%, take no risk really, it's not going to fluctuate in value, but I'll still use that line of credit. Yeah, you just change the percentages and you still come out ahead by doing the line of credit versus potentially a long-term capital gain. And lastly, let me just point out, I am pretending that the $200,000 that they're selling is a capital gain. Remember, I said I was trying to make it hard on one side, harder on the other. So I know somebody's going to find that.
Oh yeah. Somebody will go with that. But no, this is just a sample. This is just to get your wheels spinning, as we always like to do. And then what did the monster say when he saw a rush hour train full of passengers? Here comes the choo-choo train. Like chewing, because he's the monster and he's going to eat things.
I don't like it. I don't like that one.
You got me this darn book. And
okay. You tell me. You ready?
Okay, here we go.
So it's not here.
Cut.